Welcome to Hughes of the World. This week we are looking at the country of Colombia in South America, the land of Gabriel Garcia Marquez and his famous novel, 100 Years of Solitude fame. It is a country of amazing natural and cultural diversity, where the climate, the topography, the wildlife, the crafts, the music and the architecture can change in a matter of hours as you drive overland through the country. In fact, some have suggested it's a bit like several different countries rolled into one, which is ironic because it was once a much bigger country and it's been carved off into 4 constituent parts, which we'll come to that in the history. It is also the home of the mythical, mysterious Lost Cities of Gold, as any child of the 80s will hopefully remember Esteban and his adventures. Actually, I rewatched that show just a few years ago, and it does hold up. It is still really, really good, and I really recommend it. If any of you got kids and you think Mysterious Cities of Gold, I don't know how you can get it legally, but if you can get it, worth a watch. Colombia is exotic, it is sensual, it's wild, it's complex, and it is fascinating. And the people are gorgeous and lovely and very hospitable. And it's one of my favorite countries in the world, Colombia. I've been there twice, and both times I just wasn't there long enough. I've got to admit that. You know, there were some countries in the world that I really, really want to spend more time in. In my defense, I have lived in Panama for 3 years, and Panama used to be part of Colombia. So if you squint really hard, you could say, yeah, well, actually, you did live there for a few years. So, Panamanian culture, though, is very different from Colombian culture, I think, and they're very different histories. But, it's worth a visit. Definitely worth a visit. When I first went in 2002, it was a bit more dangerous than it is today. The FARC guerrillas still hadn't put down their arms. And it was, I'll talk about it a little bit later on in the show, but I remember being frisked about 7 times in the case of, in the span of just a few hours in the capital, Bogota. Is this where Govi gets his snow from? Well, Andrew, we're going to talk about that, mate. I'm on your Discord server. I use my middle name on there. Oh, good, Alexis. Discord, I have 0 permissions. Oh, okay, Richard, I will sort that out for you. Don't worry, after the show. Can't do it now. Well, I could do it now, but it'd be a bit boring for the people watching. Okay, so here's some facts that you need to know about Colombia. Yeah, fact me till I fart. A lot of these facts, actually, that collated, they kind of annoy me because it's like, they're the second thing, they're the third thing, they're the fourth thing, and I don't want that. I want, like, superlatives. I want the highest lake, I want the biggest city, I want the highest city, I want the longest mountain range, I want the bitterest lake, I want all the different, the most, but I'm sorry, Colombia, but you seem to have a lot of situations where it's like the second of everything. So you are the second most biodiverse country after Brazil, although it is one of 17 mega diverse countries around the world, which are, in terms of flora and fauna, are regarded as mega diverse. It is the world's number one, we're going to get number one, world's number one exporter of emeralds. You weren't expecting that, were you? Because I wasn't expecting that. I never really thought about Colombian emeralds. But then again, I never really thought about Australia and opals until I went to Cuba Pedy in Australia. And it was like, oh, this is where opals come from. So most of the emeralds that you know of come from Colombia. So it is the original Emerald City. So I guess the mysterious Lost Cities of Gold, El Dorado, was not in Colombia, but the Emerald City from the Wizard of Oz may well have been. Shakira is Colombian. There you go. And as is Sofia Vergara, who plays Gloria in Modern Family. You know Gloria, yeah. The traditional national sport of Colombia is called tejo. And this is a game that involves you getting a metal plate or a little slug of metal, right? So imagine like you know the gold bars that you get in movies and stuff, but I suppose you have them in real life as well. Imagine a smaller one of them, but just made of metal, not made of gold. And you have to throw it against, how can I describe this? Like a big rectangle, which is full of clay, essentially. And when you throw it, it sort of embeds itself in the clay. There's a target on the clay, and you're supposed to try and hit the target. But for shit and giggles, the Colombians add landmines to the clay that you're throwing the rock, or it's not a rock, it's a bit of metal, throwing this thing. I think it can be anything, actually. It's got to be a certain width or something, or a certain height, and you throw it. Anyway, if you hit a landmine, you either get points or you get points deducted, depending on who you're playing it with, I guess. And it's a big beer drinking game. It is a game that involves skill, determination, beer, and explosives. It's bonkers, and I love it. And that is the real sport of Colombia is football. The real national sport that everyone's into, but this is a particular Colombian game, and apparently it dates back to the pre-Columbian time, so it's been around for a very, very long time. Colombia is also the home of Caño Cristales, which is a river of 5 colors, or the rainbow colors. It's a brightly hued freshwater river whose aquatic plants and algae combine to create these amazing hues of red. Not hues as in me, hues as in colour. Red, blue, orange, yellow, and green along the stream. And the vibrant water and colours are unique anywhere in the world in Colombia. They have 18 public holidays a year, which is pretty cool. And also, they're obsessed with coffee. This is tea. It's too hot. They're obsessed with coffee. Everywhere I went in Colombia, I was given coffee. Everywhere I had coffee. It was just a big thing over there. Loads of sugar, black coffee, loads of sugar. There's you don't have milk in your coffee really in Colombia unless you're a child. So me asking for café con leche, I look like a bit of a tit because they're like, oh, that's a child's drink. But I don't mind, when I go to somewhere for when I go to a cafe. Yeah, and other people are getting coffee because they're grown-ups. I usually go for like a milkshake or something with like a bit of squirted cream on top and hundreds of thousands and maybe some marshmallows and a big straw. I sit there having a serious business conversation, drinking this. Probably why I've got no money. Okay, talking of money, you can't give any super chats for this. So despite my best efforts of getting more subscribers, we've only got 63 on this channel at the moment, and we need another 937 or something. So yes, they will come in time. I'm sure if you build them, they will come. I've got to put more videos of my travels on this channel so that people might watch it. Okay, so also Colombia is one of the biggest coffee exporting countries in the world after Brazil and weirdly Vietnam. And it's home to over 100 different indigenous groups, mostly living in the Amazon area of Colombia, which we'll come to a little bit in the geography when we go on to that. There are 60 national parks, which comprise 10% of the country, and it is home to, what you can see behind me, the world's tallest palm trees. There you go, superlatives. That's what we like. We'll see more of. Good. Okay, moving on to the thing. I never got an invite. Glasgow, it should be Glasgow. If you go onto the YouTube members page for my politics channel, there's a link on there, and it should give you a link to the server. If you come on there after the show, then I can give you all the permissions so you can do everything. Okay, so just if you can get that. If you can't, I'll WhatsApp you the link. Okay, Colombia, country of Cafe and Ugly Betty, the soap opera, and the soap opera, I guess. Yes, David, indeed. Randomly, the Grand Tour blokes are in Colombia finding free-range hippos. Yes, these are the hippos that escaped from Pablo Escobar's zoo, was it? That now roam around Colombia, much in the manner that the camels that were set free after the end of the gold rush in Australia in the 1880s have multiplied in the desert somehow, and now there's thousands of camels in the Australian desert going, where the hell are we? We're not natives of this continent. Moving on, real men in Colombia don't drink milk. There you go. There's a coffee growing problem apparently due to global warming. That's a bit shit, Richard, but yeah, I couldn't see that happening. And lots of lactose intolerance, says just me in videos. Andrew Ray says, my dad bought some emeralds in the mountains cheap. He was working as a civil engineer and they're based in Bogota, but he had to quit as he had a heart attack from the high altitude in that city. Oh my God, he had a heart attack. That's awful. Sorry to hear that, man. But yeah, it is a very, it's a mountainous country, as we'll come to when we look at the map. The capital of Colombia is Bogota, and the flag is very reminiscent of the Venezuelan flag and the Ecuadorian flag. There's a reason for that. They all used to be one country. So they're all yellow, blue, red in that order. But the Colombian one, for some reason, the top half of it is yellow, which I think looks daft. I don't like it. I don't like tricolours at the best of times, so I think they're boring flags. I mean, it's just 3 lines, who cares? But this one in particular, I think I've jazzed it up a little bit by making it a bit jaunty, but like, seriously, what a boring flag. Sorry, Colombia, you got a boring flag. Get a more interesting flag that doesn't look like the flag of Venezuela and the flag of Ecuador. Top tip. Also, New Zealand, sort it out, mate. It's just the flag of Australia, mate. Just get your own flag. Just Kiwi, lasers coming out of its eyes. That's your flag. That's your flag, New Zealand. Sorry, going off on one. Anyway, the yellow is to symbolize gold, and the blue is to symbolize the sea, and the red, you're never going to guess this. You're never going to guess what the red represents. Yeah, it represents cochineal, which is a type of food colouring that they make from beef. No, it's not. It's to represent blood. It's always to represent blood in these things. But yes, it's to represent blood. And yes, it is very similar to other flags. What can I say? The name of the country is Colombia, and that comes from Cristobal Colon. It's a bit weird. In Spanish, he's called Cristobal Colon. This is why in Bocas del Toro, the island next to Ginger Island is called Cristobal, and the main island where the airport is called Colon. And there's also a city in Panama called Colon, and that's the name of Christopher Columbus in Spanish. But for some reason, Colombia is like almost Columbus. It's just like, I don't know, Latin or something. There you go. So that's where the name comes from, and it's got 2 O's in it, not an O and a U. The population is just over 50 million. It's 50.8 million. That's the population from 2020. The language is Spanish, obviously. The currency is the Colombian peso, and the GDP per capita is around $5,337 per annum. The food is the traditional food of South America, which is ham and cheese sandwiches, jamón y queso sandwiches, which you can find everywhere, which is great. It's a bit like going into the cafe in Monty Python where they only sell spam. I was in Colombia once and I saw a sign and it was all the different sandwiches they had, and it was like you could get a queso sandwich, a jamón sandwich, you could get jamón and jamón, you could get jamón and queso, you could get jamón and queso, and it was like, can you get anything but ham and cheese? Maybe we could put some tomatoes in there. Oh, okay, cool. But the other thing is that they have a big breakfast over there. Now, Britain pride itself on a full English people pride themselves on a full English breakfast, which is arguably a more decent, hearty meal than a continental breakfast. And if any of you have travelled throughout Europe, the mainland, especially youth hosteling, there's nothing more dispiriting than waking up in the morning and being presented with a cold, hard-boiled egg, a bit of very, very sweet toast, and some bloody apricot jam and no butter, which is seemingly the breakfast of choice of every youth hostel, sort of in the mainland of Europe. But Britain says, well, we had this amazing breakfast. Well, they have something similar in Colombia. It is called the bandeja paisa, and it is a meaty masterpiece of Colombians' Anticolija, I'm probably pronouncing that wrong, region, and it involves ground beef, chicharrones, avocado, rice, beans, plantain, which is like big bananas, big savory bananas, fried egg, arepa, which I don't even know what that is, and chorizo. All in fact, so it's basically like a South American version of a full English for breakfast. But yeah, bit of a gutbuster. And for drinking, there is a licorice firewater called aguardiente, which is licorice flavored liqueur, which is reminiscent of ouzo. If you've ever been to, I think, Greece, do they have ouzo? Yeah, it's licorice flavor. Or aniseed licorice tastes the same to me. I don't know. Maybe that's just me. David is correcting my pronunciation of bandeja paisa. Yeah, that's it. In Spain, it's called sandwich mixo, ham and cheddar cheese and butter. Australia adopted their flag a year after New Zealand. Perhaps they should adopt laser eye wallabies. Yeah! Stick Boy NZ watching in the house. Sorry, NZ, obviously. But it's just easier to say Z. I've got to agree with the Americans on that one. It's like aluminum. I kind of agree with the Americans on calling it aluminum because that's what it was called before we changed the name of it to aluminium, so it fitted in with the other elements of the periodic table that end in IUM instead of UM. Anyway, Britain cannot cook their own signature breakfast. Never a decent breakfast in London. Yes, just me and videos. You're absolutely right. You can't get a decent breakfast in London, but if you come up north, there are a lot of really amazing Greasy Spoon cafes up here that do a really good English breakfast. I'm joining at the weekend in a B&B just outside Derby. Got to get home tomorrow. Wow, that's pretty cool, mate. Well done. Both the Australia and New Zealand should adopt the Union flag upside down. Fair enough. Anyway, so where was I? The national anthem. Oh, I want to talk about this. So the national anthem, which I'll play for you if you like. Should we do this? Because I don't do enough sort of AV stuff, I feel, and I should do more of it. Let's have a listen. Is this actually working? There we go. It's called O Gloria in Marcesible. It literally means "Oh, unfading glory." And furrows of pain, good now germinates. Goodness now germinates. I can't just translate this for you as you go. Oh, unfading glory. Oh, immortal joy. In furrows of pain, goodness now germinates. Okay, that goes on for far too long. That's 4 minutes. Screw that. Okay, so if you heard that, I don't know if that came through. I hope it did. But that is the Colombian national anthem there. And it must be played by government decree on the TV and radio at 6 o'clock in the morning and 6 o'clock at night, or in the afternoon, whatever, evening, every day, which is quite fun. Please don't make that happen in the UK. I will die. I would hate that. I would hate it. So I'm going to just read a few more messages here, and then I'm going to jump into the geography. Graham, don't forget the banana with rice. Ooh, yes. Santa Marta have mosquitoes the size of sparrows. That's like something from Monty Python. The mosquitoes were the size of sparrows, I tell you. Take the knee. Catherine's there. Hi, Kat. She says, missing you. Hi, Kat. Right, we're going to go over to the she's missing me upstairs. No, she's away. She's away for the evening. Which is why I went to see Ben. I escaped to see Ben, and Ben made me a wonderful steak. He made me a wonderful steak. Thank you, Ben. Thank you. I can't get over how hospitable it was to go and see Ben Chambers. And if you don't listen to the 16 Million Rising radio show he does, I really, really recommend it. He puts a lot of work into those shows, and I think he deserves a much bigger audience than the likes of James Melville. What can I say? Haven't mentioned the fact that Cressida Dick has resigned. Obviously, it's got nothing to do with Colombia, but it's nice to know, isn't it? I'm just going to disconnect that because I don't like cables showing up on my screen. Right. Can you turn the mic down a bit? Okay, I will turn it down even more. Wow, this is quite low. All right, is that better? Is that better? I don't know why it's after I did my after we did our film on Sunday, the microphone settings and all the audio settings on my laptop and my setup here have just been all over the shop. So sorry about that. But yeah, is that better, Lee? Let me know in the comments. Right, we are going to go over to the map now, which is the map of all maps that shows us the map of the world. And here we go. Here's the map of the world. Ooh, there you go. That is the world. That is planet Earth. You may recognize it from such documentaries as Planet Earth. So if I zoom into South America here, you can see here the Death Star orbiting the planet moon of Endor. No, this is Panama over here. There's a little umbilical cord that holds North America to South America, and Colombia is the only South American country, as you can see quite clearly here, the only South American country that actually has a coast on the Atlantic or the Caribbean Sea, which is part of the Atlantic, and the Pacific over here. Obviously, nearly every country in Central America and North America, apart from El Salvador and Belize, have coasts on both oceans. But Colombia is the only South American country that does. You might think that Chile does, but technically, even though it does loop under here, it doesn't really touch the Atlantic Ocean. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it. Okay, so if we zoom in a little bit to Colombia here, you can see the big cities. So there's Bogota. There's Medellin. That's how that's pronounced, Medellin. And then up here we have Barranquilla over here. And if I zoom in a little bit, there is Cartagena, which is just there. It's really small. I'm going to try and make the text a little bit bigger for you. Oh no, that's made things appear at the top, which I don't want to appear. Oh well, you just have to take my word for it. There's Cartagena there, which is an important port city in Colombia, a very old port city, and it's where the pirates used to like to hang out. So there's Cali, there is Bogota, there is Medellin. You've probably heard of these three cities, Medellin and Cali, famous for their cocaine cartels. Unfortunately, that's how people know them. But then if we just look at Colombia as a whole, it's got borders with Panama over here. It's got a border with Venezuela over here. It's got a border with Ecuador over here. It's got a border with Peru over here. And this border with Brazil over here as well. Kind of gets on with its neighbors. Venezuela's relationship's not been great over the last few years because of the crazy person in charge, Maduro. But generally speaking, all right. And there's also a bunch of islands over here in the Caribbean Sea, one of which speaks English, actually, which I found fascinating because reasons. The country of Colombia is split into bits. You've got the Pacific bit here, which is on this side of the mountains. You've got the mountains, which is the Andes, called the Andes. We've got the northern Andes, technically, but they call it just Andes. Over here, we've got the Caribbean section, obviously, by the Caribbean Sea. And over here, we have the Orinoco bit, which is on the Orinoco River, named after the famous Womble. And over here, in the green bit, this is the Amazon area. Now, nearly everyone lives, if I draw this line with my mouse cursor here, you can see there's roads here, and there's no roads here. There's a reason for that. Everybody in Colombia pretty much lives on this side of this line, and hardly anyone lives in this area because it is dense, tropical Amazonian rainforest and jungle. And a few indigenous tribes still live there, which is really quite cool. So, so there's a few crazy little geographical things about Colombia. One of them is there's a desert called La Guajira, which may be the closest you could get to actually being on Mars. It's got red rock formations and empty terrain. I think in several movies and things, it's doubled as Mars or the moon. And there's also the town of Loro in the Chaco region, which experiences the most annual rainfall in the world. Another superlative. I love my superlatives. Leave me alone. Which actually has, get this, 44 feet or 13.4 meters of rain a year. True story. Barranquilla. Sorry, I'm pronouncing things wrong all over the shop here. Mic is fine. Why can't people turn their volume down? No, Chubai, if my voice is distorting, that's not good, because I don't do a local recording of this. I take it offline. So if my voice is distorting, then I can't really, I could do overdub it, but that would be a bit crazy. So no, if there's any problems technically with the stream, just let me know straight away and I'll try and sort it out while I keep talking. Here's a name, Cressida Dick. Triggered, says Duke Vengeance. Sorry, I missed that one. Originally, confirm the Earth is round. It is round. I've been around it. Jeremy Goff says, fancy someone resigning for being useless. I thought that got out in fashion. Indeed. That's a lot of water, says Reagan Elite. Yeah, indeed it is. Indeed it is. Okay, so let's jump into the history. So in contrast to the Incas or the Aztecs, who dominated vast regions, and the Mayans, Colombia, what is now Colombia, was home to several independent groups that never really formed into a giant kingdom or empire. And they were relatively small areas that were populated across the Andean region and along the Pacific and the Atlantic coasts. There wasn't much going on in the interior, although there are indigenous tribes who still live in the interior. By the interior, I mean the Amazon basin area of Colombia. But by and large, the vast majority of people then and now lived in the coastal regions because it was just easier to live in those areas. One of the things about the jungle, there's a lot of food in the jungle, but it's really hard to get to. So it's very easy to starve to death in a jungle surrounded by food. Just think about how hard it is to get into a coconut or a Brazil nut or any kind of nut that exists in a jungle. It takes more effort. You'll expend more calories trying to get into the damn thing so you can eat it than you will get out of eating it, and just problematic. And also in the jungle, everything's trying to eat you. Everything's trying to kill you. There was a lot of poisonous frogs. There's anacondas. There's all kinds of stuff. There's crocodiles in the water or caiman in the water. There are things that want you dead, and so you got to you sleep with one eye open, to say the least. But yes, so these cultures developed largely independently of each other, much like in Papua New Guinea, in which you had lots of different tribes, and each tribe had their own language, and they're not interested in getting other tribes to speak their language because they didn't want the other tribes to know what they were saying, have an advantage. And it was quite similar in the Amazonas region of Colombia. San Augustine, or Agustin, is one of the most extraordinary ceremonial centers in the whole of South America, and it's noted for hundreds of monolithic statues and tombs scattered over a wide area. This is pre-Columbian, what's now Colombia. The Muexca tribe and their culture is widely known for the myth of El Dorado, the city of gold, which was created really by the Spanish. The Muexca were known far and wide for their wealth, and they had a flourishing civilization that surrounds what's now Bogota and the north of Bogota. The discovery of the lost city, or the Ciudad Perdita, in 1975, and in the mountainous jungles along the Caribbean coast of Colombia shed new light on the Tairona culture, which developed around the 5th century AD in the Sierra Nevada de Santa Marta, which is the big mountain range to the north of the Andes. Ciudad Perdita is one of the largest ancient cities ever found in the Americas, and it predates Machu Picchu by a good 500 years. Okay, so fast forward now to 1499, and Alonso de Ojeda was the first conquistador to set foot on Colombian soil, just in time for the turn of the half millennium. The indigenous people of what's now Colombia became the targets of numerous coastal expeditions, raids, by the Spaniards, and there were several short-lived settlements that were founded, but it wasn't until 1525 that Rodrigo de Bastidas, careful how you say that, laid the first stones of Santa Marta, the earliest surviving town in what's now Colombia. In 1533, Pedro de Heredia founded Cartagena, and that grew to be a really important port town, and also a means of accessing across the whole of South America to the Pacific coast. A lot of goods came into Cartagena and then made the troublesome journey across the mountains to the Pacific. It was an alternative to going through Panama. Alonso de Ojeda. Ojeda? Ojeda. 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 He was the first conquistador. Anyway, so in 1538, Santa Fe de Bogota, which is now known as just Bogota, was founded by Jimenez de Quesada after conquering the Muexca peoples who used to live around there. He didn't find his gold that he was looking for, but he did see indigenous people offering gold, doing gold offerings into the lake, into their sacred lake, the Laguna de Guatavita, which that led to the creation of the legend of El Dorado. Meanwhile, Sebastian de Benalcazar deserted from Francisco Pizarro's army. Now, Pizarro was an absolute gobshite who was a conquistador. He's the guy who famously kidnapped the king of the Incas and then ransomed him for a room of gold. He got the room of gold, and then he killed he killed the Inca king anyway. Yeah, massive dick, Pizarro. So Sebastian de Benalcazar basically deserted from Pizarro's army, which was busy tearing up the Inca Empire at the time. And he subdued the southern parts of what's now Colombia, founding Popayan and Cali along the way. David Hoado is basically correcting my pronunciation like crazy in the chat here. Thanks, David. Moving on. 1552, King Charles V, Carlos V of Spain, created the Real Audiencia del Nuevo Reina de Granada, a tribunal based in Bogota. And this tribunal was subject to the viceroyalty of Peru. So it was still under the viceroy of Peru. Was still in charge of the overall area, but they had an important sort of, what would you call it, regional base. And then in 1717, so a good nearly, 200 years later, Bogota became the capital of its own viceroyalty. It was called the Virreinato in Spanish, de la Nueva Granada, so New Granada, it was called, comprising the territories of what is now Colombia, Panama, Ecuador, and Venezuela, which is why the flags of three of those countries are very, very similar. And Panama used to be part of Colombia until the early 1900s, which we will come to in a moment. In 1808, Napoleon placed his brother on the throne of Spain. And basically, the colonies refused to recognize this new monarch. And one by one, these Colombian towns declared their independence. And in 1812, Simon Bolivar of Bolivia fame, who was to become the hero of the independence struggle of South America, arrived in Cartagena to take up offensive against the Spanish armies. He won 6 battles, but he was unable to maintain a hold of Caracas, which is now in Venezuela, and he had to withdraw to Cartagena. But by then, Napoleon had been defeated at Waterloo, and Spain set about reconquering its colonies. Colonial rule was re-established across not Gran Colombia, that's what it's going to be called, the Nueva Granada in 1817 by the Spanish. So colonial rule was re-established. And so Simon Bolivar took up arms again. And after assembling an army of horsemen in what's now Venezuela, and aided by a British legion, probably not the British Legion, but a British legion, he marched over the Andes into Colombia. And the last and most decisive battle took place on August the 7th, 1819, and Colombia's independence was born. The battle was in a place called Boyaca. So, the new state was proclaimed called Gran Colombia. I just gave an inkling that would happen a moment ago when I accidentally called it that instead of Nueva Granada. Anyway, it was a new state comprising of Venezuela, what's now Venezuela, Colombia, and Ecuador, and Panama. I'm just going to have to check my phone for a moment because it's been buzzing this whole time, and I don't know why. No. I think it's people talking on the Discord server. Can you stop talking on Discord? It buzzes in my pocket every time someone puts a new message on there. I've got to sort that out. I've got to sort out my notifications. Listen, the last 17 messages have all been David correcting my Spanish. David, that's great. I can't do it at the same time that I'm trying to do the history. So just calm down a bit because it's, so there's a wall of words that Graham has said wrongly during this show. If someone else wants to do this for me, I'm very willing to give up my seat, especially for the Spanish episodes where I can't pronounce anything correctly, which is mortifying. But never mind. At least this isn't being recorded on the internet or going out live. Jesus. Okay, so new state called Gran Colombia was proclaimed in 1819, even though Venezuela and Ecuador were still under Spanish rule at the time. In 1821, that wasn't still a problem, and Simon Bolivar became the first president officially ratified of Gran Colombia. But from its inception, the state started to disintegrate. A central regime was incapable of governing such a vast and diverse territory. You're talking about deserts, mountains, jungles, savannas, coastal areas on different seas. Yeah, and the Darien Gap. So by 1830, so just 9 years later, Gran Colombia had split into three separate countries, all of whom have similar flags. And in 1849, the division between the centralists and the federalists was really formalized when the two political parties that will come to dominate Colombian politics right to this day, the liberals who wanted federalism and the conservatives who wanted centralism, were born. And this led to complete chaos in the second half of the 19th century, and where the country experienced no less than 8 civil wars between 1863 and 1885. And there were more than 50 anti-government insurrections. In 1899, a liberal revolt turned into a full-blown civil war. The so-called War of 1,000 Days resulted in a conservative victory and over 100,000 people dead. Yeah, not great. Not a great way to see in the new century, I guess. And bad things got even worse in 1903 for the Colombian government when the USA, good old Uncle Sam, took advantage of basically the internal strife in Colombia and fomented a secessionist movement in Panama, which used to be part of Colombia. And basically, just to go back in time a little bit, what happened was, in the 1870s, I'm going to say, the Suez Canal was opened. It was designed by a Frenchman who just basically cut a big trench through the desert from Suez to Port Said and essentially through Bitter Lake in Egypt, and it was dead easy. And then the same Frenchman decided that he was going to try and build a canal across what's now Panama, which at the time was a region of Colombia. After 27,000 people died trying to do this bloody thing, because he wants to make a sea level. He wants to make a sea level canal. A sea level canal through a mountain range. You see, in Egypt, there's no mountain range that you've got to worry about from the Mediterranean to the Red Sea, right? You don't have to go across mountains. It's fine. You don't need to do that. But in Panama, you need to go across bloody mountains. So trying to make a sea level canal, I mean, and in any case, the sea level of any given sea is slightly different depending on where you are in the world. It's only the average of the flow of the sea. And obviously, the Pacific and the Atlantic are two massive oceans, and where they meet, just south of the Tierra del Fuego, in Chile, is basically mountainous bloody waves, because you've got this big force of waves coming from the Pacific and this big force of waves coming from the Atlantic. And the really interesting thing is the water doesn't mix. It's a weird phenomenon that happens on there. It kind of hits each other and then flows back into itself. And there's not a lot of mixing that goes on. And they are very separate seas, even when the water's connected. It's just mind-blowing. Anyway, so after 27,000 people died trying to build this bloody thing, the French gave up. They went, oh, screw this, to a bunch of soldiers. And so the Americans under Theodore Roosevelt, Teddy Roosevelt, the guy who teddy bears are named after, who was a bit of an adventurer himself. He once went on an expedition down the Amazon. I think he was like the sole survivor of the damn thing. And I think he was the guy who got shot during his inauguration and then finished his inauguration speech before he would go to hospital to deal with the gunshot wound. Anyway, he really wanted to build this canal. They said to the then government of Colombia, hey, can we build a canal? And the government of Colombia said, okay, I guess we could talk about it. And the Americans go, okay, well, I'll tell you what, we'll build the canal, we'll pay for it, and then we get to use it for 100 years. And the Colombian government said, actually, we'd like to build it ourselves, maybe, if we are going to build it. We're not definitely going to build it, but if we do build it, we'd rather have that money for ourselves rather than give it to America. And America went, oh, that's interesting. We're just going to go and talk to our friends in Panama for a moment in that, region in the very northwest of your country. And they basically said, do you really want to be part of Colombia? You've got this thing called the Darien Gap, which is an important break on the Pan-American Highway, which runs all the way from Alaska down to the south of Chile, all the way down. And it's got this sort of 30-mile break in the middle of it, which is the Darien Gap. And I'll talk a bit more about the Darien Gap when I'm talking about the Panama in a couple of years' time, when I do the Panama episode, because there was a bunch of Scottish colony there, which unfortunately died a pretty horrific death. But the Darien Gap is a very dense part of the jungle, and it's very, very difficult to get any transportation across it. It's quite dangerous as well, with all things being equal. So if you want to get from Panama to Colombia, even though it used to be part of the same country, you really have to take a ship. Probably via the San Blas Islands, which are beautiful, which are part of Panama, and then down into Colombia. So, so Panama was persuaded by the Americans to break away, become its own country, so the Americans could build the canal, which they did, and they put locks in it, which the French didn't seem to think of or didn't want to do, which is makes more sense than trying to cut through a mountain. Trying to cut through a mountain with shovels. This is 100 years ago. It's more than 100 years ago. Anyway, so after many, many years, the Panama Canal finally opened in about, 1916 or something, and ships could finally go through. And it was actually expanded just a few years ago, so that bigger ships could get through. The biggest ship that could get through the Panama Canal in the old days was called the Panamax ship, the maximum for the Panama Canal. It's called the Panamax ship. And now there's post-Panamax, which is the new size that they can get through, the new locks in Miraflores. Anyway, I'm talking about Panama here, which is really relevant to Colombia because it's now a separate country. Anyway, so it wasn't until 1921 that Colombia finally went, oh, right then, so 18 years later, and first of all, settled its dispute with the USA and finally recognized the sovereignty of Panama as its own individual nation. Obviously, Panama was getting backed up by the Americans, and Colombia wasn't really in a position to fight against the Americans at the time. Still isn't. Squire, write that down. Building things that no one will like or think is a good idea. Pan American Highway ends in Argentina. Oh yeah, that's true. But if you're trying to drive down through Chile, you kind of got to stop, haven't you? You can't keep going down. You got to get a boat because it's got kind of fjords, but they're not fjords or whatever. I mean, talked about that in the Chile episode. So anyway, let's move on to we're coming up to time. Better hurry up with the history, Graham. Hurry up. In 1948, after a period of relative peace, the struggle between liberals and conservatives flared once again with the outbreak of La Violencia, I think that's pronounced. The violence, the most destructive and brutal of Colombia's many civil wars. The death toll was in excess of 300,000. And the barbarism of this period was off the charts. I mean, there was a lot of awful things happened, which I'm not going to go into right now because I'm kind of sick and tired of, I know this is crap of me, but I'm sick and tired of talking about these horrible things that people have done in the past. It was fucking horrible. And the worst thing about it for me is the fact that the situation at the time for a century, right? Colombians had been raised by their parents as either liberals or conservatives, and they would fight for their team. It's like a football team, but they'll fight to the death. They'll be prepared to kill someone because what they were told when they were a child, you are a conservative, you are a liberal, you are a federalist, and you are a centralist, so don't kill each other. And it's like, it could have been their football club. It's painful. They're basically 300,000 people dead for just for nothing more than the name of their party, you know. And so this idea that you had villages and stuff where everyone was a conservative, and if someone was a liberal, they're like, oh, they were ostracized, and yeah, it's just it pains me. It really pains me. But yeah, by 1953, some of the liberal guerrillas, guerrillas as in war people, guerrillas, rather than gorillas in the mist, began to demonstrate, should we say, a dangerous degree of independence, and had made alliances with small bands of communists. And, obviously that was something that the liberals and the conservatives wouldn't stand for. So they actually, the liberals and the conservatives teamed up. Yes, after years of fighting each other, they teamed up against the communists. So there you go. There's a bit of information for you that you might want to know. Everyone hates communists. More than they hate fascists, by the looks of things, judging by the history of the world. But yeah, so it freaked out the liberals and conservatives enough that they decided to support a military coup is the best way to retain power. And this led to the dictatorship of General Rojas, which lasted for 4 years. And then in 1957, the leaders of the two parties signed a pact to share power for the next 16 years. And in this, it's a bit of a crazy pact, but it kind of makes sense, I guess, in a way. But the way they did it, for the next 16 years, right, for the following 16 years until the 1970s, they would have a liberal president for 4 years, and then they'll have a conservative president for 4 years. Then they'll have a liberal president for 4 years, then they'll have a conservative president for 4 years. And this went through until the 1970s. So basically, despite all the bloodshed, despite over a million people being butchered to death, the same people returned to power. And there was no point in contesting elections anymore. So we went from this kind of flawed democracy that was all kept falling into civil war into kind of this autocracy where it was like a weird autocracy because it wasn't just one group of people always in charge. They swapped between them. But I guess when people go, oh, politicians are all the same. I mean, yeah, bit of a weird one, but that's what they managed to do. And that kind of ended the civil wars to some extent. However, it led to the growth of these guerrilla movements. And guerrillas have been an important part of the Colombian political life for a long time, since the Violencia. And they continue to wreak havoc throughout the 20th century. The main ones being FARC, which you've probably heard of, the ELN, not ELO, that's the Electric Light Orchestra, and the M19. And in the early 1980s, President Betancourt opened direct negotiations with the guerrillas in a bid to incorporate them into the nation's political life. However, the talks ended in failure. This rupture was potently symbolized by the takeover of the Palacio de Justica, the Palace of Justice in Bogota in 1985 by the M19. However, after long and complicated negotiations with the M19, the Liberal government of President Barco in the late 80s got them to sign an agreement in which they handed over their arms, they ceased their insurgent activities, and they launched themselves as a political party. However, FARC and the ELN remained under arms, and until the turn of the millennium, they controlled about 40% of the country's area. However, a lot of that area was not populated or sparsely populated compared with the cities and things over in the northwest of the country rather than the southeast. Since the state was unable to control the parts of the country that they had lost, private armies mushroomed, these so-called paramilitaries, which were far right-wing Nazis, essentially, who fought against the left-wing guerrillas, but were also fighting against the regular army, who were fighting against the guerrillas. So the guerrillas were fighting the regular army and these other. And then you've got to throw the drug cartels into the equation, who seem to be fighting against everybody: the government, the army, the right-wing guerrillas, the left-wing guerrillas. Oh my God, it was an absolute cluster F. And we're gonna have to talk about drugs. We need to talk about Kevin. No, we're going to talk about drugs. So Colombia is still the world's biggest producer of cocaine. It used to supply 80% of the world's market. I think that's gone down a bit in recent years, but the boom really began in the 1980s with the Medellin cartel run by Pablo Escobar, who's seen as a folk hero by some, knobheads mostly people who would look at someone like, I don't know, Boris Johnson, Donald Trump, Bolsonaro, Duterte, Corbyn, Russell fucking Brand, Joe Rogan, and go, oh my God, I've got to follow you into the volcano. I love you so much. It's pathetic and really annoys me because these people are not good people. They're not good people. They're not worth following. I mean, maybe you could listen to an interview with them or a podcast now and again, but to follow them like they're the Messiah, it's embarrassing. Pablo Escobar killed thousands of people. He blew up a plane. He put pipe bombs in cars, blew up cars all over the country. And it wasn't just the people he was targeting for assassinations who died. It was the people who got blown up, who were innocent bystanders. These people were criminals. And just because they gave a tiny, tiny amount of their money to the poor, the only reason why those people were so poor in the first place was because people like Escobar were in charge and just wanted money for themselves. He did that on purpose because he thought, well, if I get the common people on side, then I'm all set to go, which he thought he was until the early 90s when he got shot dead. But the point is that this idea, this folk hero, this gangster folk hero, it really pisses me off because these people are monsters. And just because a monster does a nice thing now and again doesn't stop them being monsters, especially if they've killed children. And Pablo Escobar killed children. That's nothing to say. Let's talk about drugs. Let's talk about this line of misery and despair, this trail of blood and tears that runs all the way from Colombia, from a farm in Colombia, in which the farmer has had an unfortunate visit one day by drug dealers who want to grow drugs on that farmer's land. The farmer doesn't want to grow drugs on the land, so these men come and they rape his daughter and kill her in front of the guy and say, right, you've got to grow our drugs for us. And the farmer has no choice but to grow these freaking drugs on his land. Usually mixed in with his other crops as well. So the flybys from the FBI the CIA, won't see them from above. And then that cocaine has to be harvested. Do you think the people harvesting it get paid really well? No, they don't. They get paid peanuts for doing a job that's actually, when it comes to the processing, is incredibly dangerous. Not just because they might get murdered by a different cartel, but also because the chemicals that they use when they make cocaine are insane. If you ever watch the process of making cocaine on the internet, and I suggest that you look for this on YouTube, maybe after the show, say, let's see how they make cocaine. They put it in a big oil barrel and mix it in with all kinds of crap. And you're like, oh my God, that's how they make it? I thought it was this wonderful, method where you get the coca leaves and you'd somehow turn them into cocaine in a nice, friendly, environmentally friendly way. No, that doesn't happen. And then you've got to get the drugs out of Colombia, which there's a few ways of doing that. You could put them in a container. You could use a mule. I don't mean the animal, a mule. I mean a human being that is being used as a mule. Like maybe a woman who is forced to swallow 50 condoms filled with cocaine and then fly that on that plane to America. America that consumes a lot of this cocaine and is also the place where they're saying, oh, we've got to fight this war on drugs. Yeah, well, I tell you what, instead of blaming the victims, why don't you take the drug takers to task? Although we can't do that because you've got people like Boris Johnson, Michael Gove, Donald Trump, who are all massive cokeheads. I mean, if maybe they're not now, I think they probably still are, but they have been in the past, and they've not been shy about saying that they have been. So they've indulged. Oh, I'm indulged. If a woman had come over in a group of mules from Colombia with their stomach filled with cocaine, and they land, and they go to the hotel where they're supposed to meet up, and one of the condoms ruptures inside the internal digestive system of the woman who's had to swallow all these damn things, the drug dealers will cut that woman open to get to the drugs. And then they will sell them to people with more money than sense. If you've got enough money for cocaine, then you have more money than sense. It's as simple as that. But before it can be sold to the person on the street, it's got to go through another layer of control, the local drug pushers, the local drug dealers, which go to the pushers on the street who are actually selling it on the street and therefore putting their own lives and liberty at risk to get you your drugs if you take it. There is a line of tears and blood from Colombia to Pete Doherty's nose, and it fucks me up really up. I'm sorry, I shouldn't swear on these, but like it's one of my biggest bugbears. I've never taken any illegal drugs, and I never will, not because of any other reason. I'm annoying enough as I am. I mean, because imagine me on cocaine, but because I know the suffering that goes on in the world. And as one of the people who is like 100% against drugs, I wish they didn't exist, but they do. Therefore, they should be legalized. That is it. No decriminalization. I don't want to see some shitty halfway house. Just legalize the damn stuff and regulate it and make sure the farmers get enough food, get enough pay, make sure they don't get attacked by these bloody drug farmers, drug dealers who want to grow their crop in that farmer's field. Make sure that no one is having to swallow condoms full of cocaine to get it into a country. That shouldn't have to happen. Make sure Mexicans aren't being shot trying to cross the border with a backpack full of crystal meth, heroin, cocaine. Doesn't need to happen. It doesn't need to be this way. If people want to do it, fine. I'm not going to stop them. But that Trail of Tears doesn't need to exist. And there's a similar Trail of Tears, a heroin Trail of Tears coming from Afghanistan. Because the only reason the Taliban have enough money to stay in power in a country that is absolutely bankrupted and now has been hit by sanctions from every other country in the world is because they can sell heroin to the West. And again, Trail of Tears. If the Taliban didn't have control of those opium fields over the last 20 years, and even before then, they wouldn't be a thing. Because in order to have power, you need money. And we can't strangle their source of income because people are always going to want heroin. Always, unfortunately. But yeah, let's blame the victims in all this. Let's not blame the actual, drug users. Anyway, so I blame a couple of things for the situation in the UK at the moment. And those two things are private schools and cocaine. Right, let's get back to talking about Colombia specifically. So for a time, Pablo Escobar was the richest man on the planet. In 1982, he was elected to Congress, but he was thrown out for not wearing a tie, apparently, according to the TV show Narcos, which is well worth watching, by the way. And the government launched a all-out war against the drug trade, the famous war on drugs that's been raging for 50 years now. And it's still not been won in any way, shape, or form. The war became even bloodier in August 1989 when Luis Carlos Galán, the leading liberal contender for the 1990 presidential election, was assassinated. The government responded with the confiscation of nearly 1,000 mafia-owned properties and announced new laws on extradition to allow drug dealers to be extradited to the United States of America. The cartels responded in the way that cartels do, with the use of terrorist tactics, lots of car bombs. In 1990, the election of liberal Cesar Gaviria. Come on, David. Am I saying this right? Cesar Gaviria, in 1990, gave a brief period of hope following these lengthy negotiations. They managed to make a constitutional amendment to ban the extradition of Colombians to America. Escobar and the remaining cartel bosses surrendered and narco-terrorism subsided. Narco-trade didn't, but the narco-terrorism side of it subsided. However, Escobar soon escaped from the prison that he was put in, that he built himself. It's like a clubhouse that he lived in, that he built himself, and that was his prison. And he had a tunnel out of it in case the government changed their mind and said, hey, we're going to put you in a proper jail where you can't get out. So he had this means of escape, and a 1,500-man unit was sent to track down Pablo Escobar. One man, 1,500 men out to catch one man, and he evaded capture for 499 days before he was shot dead in the city of Medellin in December 1993. The drug trade that was dominated by the Medellin cartel was quickly taken over by the Cali cartel. And it also diversified into opium poppies and heroin. The cartel's top bosses were arrested and thrown in jail in 1995. However, the drug trade continued to flourish. And around the same time, there was a huge scandal when Liberal President Ernesto Samper was wiretapped talking to some members of the Cali cartel, where they basically said that they would make donations to his campaign fund. There's a huge web of corruption was uncovered, but the president maintained that he was unaware that drug money had gone to fund his campaign. And yes, there was an investigation. There's an inquiry. And do you know what the inquiry found? He did nothing wrong. Yeah, it was widely considered a farce, but he was cleared of all charges in June of 1996. By the end of his term in the country, the country was in the worst economic and public order situation in recent decades. However, talk with the FARC guerrillas began again in 1999, and under the administration of President Uribe, I hope I'm saying that right. From 2002 to 2010, they adopted democratic security policy, which included an integrated counter-terrorism and counter-insurgency campaign. As part of the controversial peace process, the AUC, the right-wing paramilitaries, not the guerrillas, not the left-wing guerrillas, but the right-wing paramilitaries who went after the guerrillas in the jungle because, of course, they all thought they were Batman or something. They basically, the AUC as a formal organization ceased to function. And then in February 2008, millions of Colombians demonstrated against FARC and other outlawed groups. After the peace negotiations in Cuba, then Colombian President Juan Miguel Santos and the guerrillas of the FARC-EP announced the final agreement to end the conflict once and for all. However, the referendum to ratify the deal was unsuccessful. Afterwards, the government and the Colombian government and FARC signed a revised peace deal in November 2016, which the Colombian Congress approved. And in 2016, President Santos was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize. So there you go. The government began a process of attrition and comprehensive can't speak anymore. Comprehensive reparation. I can't even speak English, never mind Spanish, David. So, there's no hope for me. The government began a process of attention and comprehensive reparation for the victims of the ongoing, the past conflict with the FARC and what's the other one called? I've forgotten the names of all the groups now. The FARC guerrillas and the M19 guerrillas and what's the other one? The ELN guerrillas. Anyway, so yeah. Oh, Charlie's here. Hi, Charlie. Saying hail. Priti Patel. People say Priti Patel is the queen of magic dust, says David. Yeah, indeed. Wouldn't surprise me. Anyway, so Colombia has shown in the last few years shown progress in the struggle to defend human rights, and has been commendated by Human Rights Watch, and a special jurisdiction of peace was created to investigate and clarify and prosecute and punish serious human rights violations and grave breaches of international humanitarian law which occurred during the armed conflict, which happened on the far right-wing by the far right-wing paramilitaries, by the left-wing guerrilla groups, by the army, by the government forces, and all that kind of stuff. So there was a lot of different moving parts at the time. And then since 2015, the president's term, which I think is a really good idea, the president's term in Colombia has been restricted to a single 4-year term. And that is it. And you're barred from running for a re-election, even in non-consecutive terms. I think great. Yeah, do that. Do that everywhere. You only get 4 years. I don't care if you are Angela Merkel. I don't care if you are Boris Johnson. 4 years, that is all you get, maximum. And then someone else has the job. Anyway, so that's what they've done since 2015. And as a consequence, obviously, President Santos is no longer the president. And in June 2018, Ivan Marquez, or Ivan Duque, am I saying that right? Duque? Marquez, the candidate of the far right-wing Democratic Center Party, whatever, won the presidential election, and he was sworn in as the new president of Colombia to succeed Juan Manuel Santos. Colombia's relations with Venezuela have become very frayed over the last few years because of, first of all, the lunacy of, I forgot his name, Chavez, and now with the President Maduro of Venezuela, famously of the Maduro diet fame, which is where people lose loads of weight because there's no food to eat. Basically, yes, I keep saying basically. Stop saying basically. It's really annoying. So in the last few years, the ideological differences between the two governments have flared up. Colombia has offered humanitarian support with food and medicines to mitigate the shortage of supplies in Venezuela. This has been rebuked quite strongly by Venezuela. And in February 2019, Maduro cut off diplomatic relations with Colombia as he had helped Venezuelan opposition parties or opposition politicians to deliver humanitarian aid to the country. So let me get this straight. Your neighbor delivers humanitarian aid to your country, and instead of saying thank you, when people in your own country are starving, you say, oh, I'm going to cut off diplomatic relations with you now. Yeah, that's how mad Venezuela has got. I hope by the time, in 4 years or 5 years or whatever, by the time I get to the V's for Venezuela, I hope the situation has rectified itself in Venezuela, and I hope that Maduro is no longer the president there. But at the moment, you've just got to hope, because when one man has the power over a nation like that and he's letting his own people starve to death, then yeah. And he's the head of a personality cult. I really hate personality cults. I would never want a personality cult around myself because it's just rubbish. And you end up with George Lucas syndrome, where everyone around you goes, yes, George, that's a great idea. That's a wonderful idea. Yes, Jar Jar Binks will have a jive-talking amphibian thing that steps in poo in a Star Wars movie. Yes, George, what a great idea you had. Let's make this whole movie about the trade disputes, because everyone wants to hear about trade disputes. Oh, my God. Anyway, right. So moving on. The Colombia recognized Venezuelan opposition leader Juan Guaido as the country's legitimate president. And in January 2020, Colombia rejected Maduro's proposal that the two countries will restore diplomatic relations. So obviously, Colombia just went off in a big huff and said, I'm here to deal with you. Protests started in April last year when the government proposed a tax bill which would greatly expand the range of 19% value-added tax on products. The current president is Ivan Duque. Can I just say Duke? I'm going to say Ivan Duque Marquez is the current president of Colombia. And yeah, that brings us up to speed, I think. So my experience personally of Colombia, I think it's a beautiful country. It is a stunning country. It's absolutely stunning. I don't want to say it's like nowhere else on earth, because it is a bit like the other countries around it. However, it's made all the richer by just the nature of the people who live there. I was overwhelmed by the hospitality that I was shown when I visited. So I've been twice. I went first in 2002. And like I said earlier in the show, I was in Bogota only for the day. And I got searched by the police so many times. They didn't like me filming anything. I had a video camera with me. Obviously, I go everywhere with the video camera. And yeah, they didn't like that. They didn't like it. What are you filming? When you film this beautiful building here? Oh, you're allowed to film there. So yeah, but the people that I met were wonderful, and I travelled through Colombia as part of the Odyssey expedition in 2009, and again, it was just one of those places that looking out the window of the coach driving through along the Andes, waking up at 6 a.m. and this little, I was freezing cold. I was up this mountain. There was a little shack by the side of the road, and we all had the little bit of coffee, like little espresso coffee with loads of sugar in it. Whoa, I'm awake now. I'm awake. Wow. And I had a cold wind whipping into my face. Wow, it's cold up here. I wasn't expecting this in Colombia. I thought it'd be hotter than this. Obviously, when you go down towards the coast, it's a lot hotter very, very fast. I went to Medellin, and Cali, and sorry, no, I didn't go to Medellin. I went to Cali, and then I went on to Bogota again. And yeah, I'd love to go back. And one of the trips that I wish to take in the next few years will be on a trip to Panama. I want to take a boat to the San Blas Islands and then on to Colombia and maybe spend a few nights in Cartagena, which is somewhere I've never been, but I've always wanted to go to Cartagena. It's also a really great name for a place. You know, a place has a really good name. I think Cartagena has a great name, and I like it. Pronounced Doke. Oh, okay. All right. The current president of Colombia is Ivan Duque Marquez. Okay, just change the name. It won't matter. Maduro, not Maduro. Maduro. Okay. Can you do Ukraine next week asking for a foreign secretary, says Chubai. No, next week is not Costa Rica. Fooled you. It is Comoros. It's the next in order of countries in alphabetical order. Comoros, which is a little island group of 3 islands. It should be 4, according to the Comorosians, but not according to the people who live in Mayotte. Comoros is a little island group that is about halfway between mainland Africa and Madagascar. And I spent several weeks there as part of the Odyssey expedition when I was stuck there and couldn't get a boat off the damn place. So I know quite a lot about Comoros, strangely enough. It's an oddly expensive country. And I think it was the home of the guy who did the big embassy bombing in Nairobi. I think he came from Comoros. I'll have to check that next week when I do my research. Cartagena. Yeah, that's what I said. Cartagena. I said Cartagena. I like isn't that how you say it? Or do you say Cartagena? Cartagena. Okay. Cartagena. I like the name of it. It's like Azerbaijan. Azerbaijan. I just like it. Okay, so that's it for another edition of Hughes of the World. I hope you've enjoyed this kind of like just very cursory introduction to Colombia. I know I've jabbered on now for over an hour and almost 20 minutes. So, oh my God. But yes, I like to feel like we get there in the end. And I'm going to try and balance how much history I go through and how much in terms of mad tangents I go off on from one episode to the next. There's not much to say about Comoros, so I'm hoping that's going to come in under the 1 hour mark, but we will see. Andrew Ray says, now all Venezuelan migrants are marching through Colombia and the Darien Gap of Panama and Central America to the Mexican border of the USA. Yeah, it's a crazy time to be alive. Why are people leaving Venezuela? The richest oil, the country with the biggest oil reserves in the world is Venezuela. And yes, it's one of the poorest countries in the world because it's badly run. And this is what all comes down to bad management. It doesn't matter how much money you've got or natural resources or whatever. If you're badly run, you don't stand a chance. Number 3 says, thanks, Graham. And David is correcting my Spanish. Okay, David. I'll what I'll do next time I do a Spanish country, I'll just do an English version of the names of it. Oh, God, that won't work, will it? My anglicized version of the name of this place is. So, yes, join me next week, same bat time, same bat channel for an episode about Comoros. And until then, if you would be so kind as to head over to my Patreon account and maybe become a patron, it's only £3 a month for the minimum rung on the ladder or whatever it is. The tier, that's what they call it. The minimum is £3, and it's just the price of a cup of coffee a month, which helps me make this channel happen and have the time to do the research and put it all together and all these fancy graphics. Not that fancy. And do you know what? Do you know what I forgot to do? Do you know what I forgot to do? This is embarrassing. Right. I forgot to put up Hughes the World in that corner. So that's been missing for the whole show. I thought it looked a bit bare. Oh well, never mind. Hit the like button on the way out. And if you don't want to become a patron, you can always become a YouTube member, which is £3 or £4, I think. And that will give you access to the Discord server, to which I am going to now. So if you want to join me on the Discord server for a bit of an after Colombia chat and a quiz, please join me there in a moment and I will be there. I digress. 1 for the quiz, which is the element. Which other element besides aluminium has the same controversy and dual use of UM or IUM ending? Palladium? Technetium? No, it's molybdenum. And there's no other way of saying that. Neodymium? No. Osmium. Iridium. Calcium. Sulfur is spelt differently in America. It's spelt with an F in America and a PH in Britain. On the pH scale. Hafnium. Radon. No. There's radium and radon. They're two different ones. Presodium? No. Zirconium? No. Gadolinium? No. I don't know. Tantalum. But it is tantalum. It's not tantalium. I couldn't even say that. Tantalium? No, it's just tantalum. Tantalum. That's next to hafnium, isn't it? Hafnium, tantium. It's near Holmesium, I think, which is named after Stockholm. And rhenium is there, somewhere, osmium, and then, okay, I'm not going to go through. It's Tantalium, named after Tantalus, the king who fed his own son to the gods. The more you know. Okay, look, I'll see you over in the Discord server. If you're not a member and you want to be a member, either become a YouTube, send me a message via Patreon or via YouTube Messenger. YouTube, can you send me a message on YouTube if you're a YouTube member? Maybe you can. I don't know. But if you want to do it that way, then you can, and then I'll get the message. Or you go to the old server and send me a message through the old server, and I'll get that message, and then I'll be able to give you the link. So I should see you over on the new Graham Hughes Discord server in a moment. And until then, and until next week, I will say thanks for watching, and fair winds and following seas, traveller.